Hi everyone, it's about that time again where we're going to be doing some more rankings. I'm so excited. I love doing these videos. They are so much fun. So today we're going to be ranking the last 10 palettes that I bought. These aren't like my favorite palettes in my collection or anything like that. It's simply the 10 last palettes that's come into my collection. However, I will say that I'm going to leave this Menagerie palette by Melt out. This is what I'm wearing on my eyes today. I've only played with this once. I'm going to leave that into my next batch of 10 palettes because I just want to keep it at 10 today instead of 11. So this will be in my next ranking video whenever that ends up being. Whenever I get another 9 palettes, that's going to be in that video. So today we're going to be ranking all of my last 10 palettes. So I have 9 here, as well as the Big Conspiracy palette by Jeffree Star. So I think we should just start on the bottom. I feel like this is going to be very interesting. I haven't actually like ranked these in my mind yet, so I'm gonna take a little time to just kind of think about where I want to position these, and then I will let you know which palette is going to be my least favorite out of these, and then we'll move our way to the top. Okay, so I think I've made up my mind. For the bottom palette, today is going to be the Focallure Secret palette. I did get this sent in PR, and I played with it once and I like the color story of it, but I just wasn't really that impressed by the shadows. I like the mattes okay, but the shimmers were just not really that good. They were kind of sheer. They're tough to pick up on a brush, and I wasn't really enjoying working with this palette, but I do think that I like the idea behind the palette more than I like the actual shadows in the palette. So I don't know, I just wasn't really having a good time with that palette, so that's why that was number 10 on my list. Now the next palette is a palette that I really wanted to like, and this is the Lux Beauty For the Love of Fall palette. If you have not seen what this palette looks like, I have made videos with all of these palettes. I will link the video together with a link to the product down below in my description box if you want to go check out any of them, but this palette is beautiful. I just didn't really think that the shadows performed that well. I mean, they weren't that pigmented. They were a little bit powdery. They didn't stick that well to my eyes. I don't know. I didn't really enjoy this palette, and I just thought that it was way too overpriced for what you get here. The palette is really small. I think this was $35. I just don't think this is worth the money. I mean, this to me is worse than ColourPop quality, so I wouldn't recommend this at all. And I also think that the packaging is just really cheap for, like, look at that, like there's a sticker on the back. Like, that's just, for $35, I just expect more, and I thought that this would be better than it is, and it's just not. So that's why that's ended up being my number 9 palette. The next palette I was actually sent as well, not by the brand, but I did get this in a Pinch Me influencer box, and this is the Nomad Cosmetics, what are you called, the Marrakesh palette. This is what this palette looks like. I thought that the shadows performed okay, but I'm not a fan of a lot of satins, and there's so many satin shadows in this palette. For that reason alone, I don't think I'll ever use this palette again, because I really like my shimmers, and I like my shimmers to be very intense and very foiled and very like metallic looking, and this is just not it. But I thought that the mattes performed really nicely. I do like the color story of the palette. I do think that the palette is really nice if this is what you're looking for, but this is just not what I look for in my eyeshadows. For my next palette, now some of you might be surprised that this is not higher up on my list, some might be surprised that this isn't lower on my list, but this is the Conspiracy palette by Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson. I made so many videos with this palette, you guys, and I don't like it. I'm just not impressed by the formula. I like the color story on it though, even though like it's a little bit too neutral for my liking. I don't know why I'm showing you like you haven't already seen this palette, but I really do enjoy the color story, and I know that a lot of people complained about the color story in this, but the color story isn't my issue. My issue is simply just like the quality of the shadows. It's just not up to par to what I was expecting, and that's why I just didn't end up liking this palette. Like, I really thought that this was going to be a lot better than it really is. My number 5 spot goes to the Mini Controversy palette, also from the same collection. I thought that the quality of these shadows were better than the quality of the shadows in the bigger palette, but this color story doesn't do it for me as much as the other one. But clearly I chose quality over colors in this case, which is not always the case, but sometimes I just have to go with my gut instinct, and I don't really know why I place something over something else, but it just feels right, and sometimes I can't really explain it, and that's how I feel with this palette. Like I said, I do think that the quality of this is really nice, and I do think that I would really enjoy this together with like something else, but on its own, it's not really doing it for me. But I could see myself actually like maybe even traveling with this, because it is very nice and very sleek, and it's just like, you know, it's good. The packaging is nice and sleek and is good quality, and like, I don't know, I like the palette, but just not on its own. Next up is a palette that I put up a video with the day before I'm filming this. I actually had my sister-in-law on my channel for the first time. If you want to see that video, I'll have that linked in the corner. I was so nervous when I was filming that, and I don't know why. Like, I could even tell like in the beginning of the video that I was like stumbling over my words and stuff, and it's just weird to film with someone else. It's not something that I've ever done. But this is the Nomad Cosmetics Tokyo palette. They actually sent me this as well, which I'm so grateful for. And I like this palette even though I'm not like, again, it's the whole satin thing, which I'm just like, it's weird for me. Like, I don't understand satins because they're not a kind of formula that I really like to work with. But the multi-chromes on the bottom here are absolutely stunning. I know a lot of you wanted me to swatch these in the video, so I will actually give you some quick swatches of the multi-chromes just quickly now so you can see what some of these look like because they're absolutely stunning. So I'm just going to do the multi-chromes here, and then we can probably do another video with this palette at a later day because I do want to play more with this palette and really like understand what this palette is about. So you can see that they're quite sheer. They're almost like highlighters. I don't know if I'll be able to show you the shifts in these, but it's really strange. Like, especially this top one here. Oh, it's just so beautiful. Like, I really like these, and it's weird when you look at them like this because this shadow right here looks pink. If you look right here, it looks pink, but then on my finger, like, it just looks blue. Like, it's so strange. But like, these are really, really cool topper shades, and for that for that reason alone, I'm actually ranking this palette that high because I like something that's nice and unique in a palette, and I feel like this palette is very unique just for that bottom row, and it makes me intrigued to play more with the palette, and it means that if I'm intrigued to play more with the palette, it means that I kind of like the palette, you know? So I do think that this is a palette that I'm very happy to have in my collection. And like I said, they sent me this palette because I did a bad review on the first palette. Like, how cool is that? Like, how many brands can you say do that? I just think that's amazing. Like, I have so much respect for brands who can take constructive criticism and who don't take things personally when I do or say something about a palette that's maybe not like the most positive. Like, I try to be respectful about the things that I do say because, you know, I know that brands put a lot of thought and work and effort into like making their products, so I don't want to completely bash on the products, but I also feel like if I had a brand, I would want people to review it and say what they really mean about it because that's the only way that I would improve as a brand owner, if you know what I mean. So just getting like a lot of people's opinions about the palette, I feel like is the best way to really know what people want. So I like to give my opinion, and maybe they listen, maybe they don't, but I'm so happy to have this palette in my collection, even if it's not like ever going to be my favorite palette because I don't love all of the shades. Just like, the whole reason why I have this palette is why I like this palette in a way. I don't know if that makes sense. Let's move on though. So let's move into the top. Wait, that was my number 5. So we have 4 left. I thought we had 5 left. We have 4 left. Next up is another palette that I actually got in PR. Man, I'm getting a lot of stuff in PR. That's kind of crazy. Now that I look at this pile, I'm like, wow. That's cool though. Anyway, this is another palette that I've done a video on. This is the Remedy palette by Beauty by Stony. Here is what the palette looks like. I love the color story. I had such a good time playing with this palette when I did. I thought that all of the shadows I used performed really well. Again, this is not like a review on the palettes that, you know, I feel like are the best formula necessarily, but this is just me saying that I had a really good time working with this palette and that I would like to work with it again at some point. Will I have time for that? I don't know, because I know that this is not like a very hyped palette that's going to get a lot of views, and I don't like to spend my time doing videos that I know people aren't going to watch. So I don't know if I'm going to necessarily do more looks with this, but I did have a really good time working with this palette when I did, and I thought it performed really well, and I also really like the color story of it. I like the packaging. The only complaint that I have is that I did flip this back a little bit too quickly, too far the first time, and like it kind of ripped a little bit like in the middle here, but that was totally my own fault because I'm not very careful with my palette, so yeah, it just happened, you know. The palette in my number 3 spot is another palette that I got in PR. I'm like, who am I? Am I getting all of this shit for free? Like, that's just, it blows my mind, I swear to God. This is the Sweater Weather palette by Maxup the Makeup. I really like this palette. I love the color story. I love the amount of shades that are in here. I love that there's a lot of depth in this palette. There's a lot of fun shades to play with, even though, yes, it's more on the neutral side for me, but I've said before, I don't mind neutrals as long as I have colors to work in with the neutrals. Like, just because there's neutrals in the palette doesn't mean I'm ever going to do a whole neutral look with it, but it also doesn't mean that I'm never going to dip into the neutral shades. It's just that I'll be using them in conjunction with the other shades in the palette, you know what I mean? So I do really like the palette, and I thought that again this performed really, really well. I thought the mattes were super easy to work with. I like the shimmer formula in this. I love the packaging. Love when the inside matches the outside. Is one of my biggest pet peeves when palettes don't do that. So I really like that, and I also I love cardboard packaging. I can't help it. Like sometimes brands come out with like the most bulkiest stuff and I'm just like, stop, we don't want that. Like I just want cardboard packaging. Like why would you make anything else? It's just good all around, you know? So the palette in my number 2 spot, it was very close between number 2 and number 1, and the number 2 spot is going to go to my Menagerie Killer Purr palette. Am I biased towards this brand? 100%, because I love everything they come out with, even though I didn't have the best time with the shimmers in this palette. One of the reasons being just because they're bronzes. I hate bronzes. It's not my color. And I also find that the shimmer formula, especially on the shadow right here, is a little bit chunky. But I just love the Menagerie Cosmetics mattes so much that I feel like no matter what they come out with, if I don't like their shimmers, I'm always going to be happy to have the palettes because I love my mattes like so much. So I'm just really happy about this, and I have such a soft spot for their packaging. I mean, how can you not like a palette that has a lion on it and is called the Killer Purr palette? I'm honestly surprised that I didn't rank this on top, but it's probably just because I haven't played with it enough to really know how much I love it yet. And also the color story is a little bit almost too neutral for me to rank it on top. But saying that, the palette that's my number 1 in this bunch is actually going to be a neutral palette, and this is the Smoke Show palette by ColourPop. I've had such a good time playing with this palette. I love this palette. It's such a good addition to my collection. I think that all of the shadows perform really well. I just like grays and blacks, and I can't help it. I don't know. Every time I use this palette, I'm like, this palette is great. And for that reason, it ended up being my number 1 palette because I just love this palette, and I think it's just such a good thing to have, and it's something that I'm probably going to be traveling with because I need a black eyeshadow. Like I just need a black eyeshadow, and I love silver so much, and this little palette here just has my heart. I don't know. This is my favorite ColourPop monochromatic palette by far. I love this thing. So those are going to be my rankings. I wonder if I'll regret any of these. I don't know. I feel good about it at this time, but I feel like these ranking videos are like, my opinion could change depending on the day and depending on my mood and just depending on how I feel that day. But I feel content with where I ranked all of these, like, as of right now, and that's all that matters. So let me know if you were surprised by any of my rankings. Which one out of these palettes would you have ranked on top? If you have any of them, I would love to know. And also let me know, what is your favorite palette that you've bought lately? I would love to hear your thoughts. So that's gonna be it for today's ranking video. If you want to see some other ranking videos that I've done, you can click on one of these, and if you're new to my channel, I would love it if you would consider subscribing, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.